What's up, everyone? Vinny Musso from Musso Athletics here for day 15 of our 30 days of force, reaching the halfway point through the series. Again, still talking about our second 10-day chunk of a concept, force redirection. So if you haven't seen the first videos in the series, I strongly recommend go back, start from the beginning, watch them in order, because each kind of progresses off of one another to get you nice and caught up to where we are now. But going into today's topic, I mentioned in yesterday's video that today we're going to be talking about maximum isometrics, I like to call them. Some of you out in the strength and conditioning world might know these by a different term. Overcoming isometrics is another term that's used to describe this method of isometric training. And essentially the benefit of our max isometric exercises is, if you remember when we talked about the isometric concept a few days ago, a few videos ago, we talked about two major concepts that isometric training helps us with. It helps us recruit more muscle fibers at whatever joint angle we're working at, and it helps us, the body, recruit those muscle fibers more efficiently. So it helps us essentially recruit more muscle fibers and recruit those muscle fibers faster and more efficiently. So those are two of the main benefits of isometric training. And what maximum isometrics do is they really allow for us to get the maximum benefit of those two concepts. Recruiting more fibers and recruiting them more efficiently. And the reason for that is that max isometrics allow us to really produce maximal force in an isometric contraction. And so what I mean by this, and think of it, when we talked about isometrics, I've used that bicep curl as an example. But if you really think about it, when we're doing like an isometric bicep curl, an isometric push-up, hold, isometric, just like a body weight or a goblet squat, we're holding that bottom position. There's definitely benefit to that, but given the fact that it's not truly a maximum isometric, because at any point during that movement, I can overcome that resistance that my body's fighting against. So that bicep curl, for example, I can be holding a 15 or a 20-pound dumbbell here in that isometric position. Yes, I'm getting isometric work in my bicep, but at the same time, really any time during that exercise, I can overcome that resistance. I can fire my muscles hard enough to kind of get out of that isometric position. Now we can adjust that exercise to turn it into a maximum isometric by increasing the time. So I could take that 15 or 20-pound dumbbell and I could hold it there, and after 3, 4, 5 minutes, it's probably going to get to the point where that does become a maximum isometric, because my muscle fatigues so much that I can't pull it up. So I'm really giving everything I got just to hold that dumbbell right there. So that is one of the techniques that we can use to do a maximum isometric, but the easier and more efficient way to do a maximum isometric is to essentially perform an isometric movement or isometric muscle contraction against a weight that you can't move. So a really good example of this is essentially if you try to push down a wall. Okay, so we've seen people do wall push-ups, where they push themselves back and forth against the wall. So a way to think about what a maximum isometric is get in that wall push-up position, get your feet staggered so you got a nice base, and try to push the wall down. Okay, really, unless it's a really weak wall with damage or anything like that, chances are you are not going to push that wall down. You're not going to push through the wall. So the force, another reason that they're called overcoming isometrics is that the force against you is overcoming your ability to actually push and go through movement. So it is truly a maximum isometric contraction, because we are pushing as hard as we possibly can, but despite pushing as hard as we possibly can, we're not going to move that object. So we're in that wall example, we're not going to push down that wall. Whereas opposed to that isometric push-up, I can really at any time overcome and push myself out of that, again, unless I'm holding it for 3, 4, 5 minutes, and it gets to the point where my muscles are so fatigued and exhausted that I can't push myself out of it. So that's how we can turn those into, maximum or overcoming isometrics. But the easier way to do it is just move a weight or try to move a weight that you cannot move. So again, that wall example. No matter how hard we push, we're not pushing that wall down. And this could be applied to a lot of different exercises. I like to do it a lot with our deadlifts. So one way that we could do it, either load up a straight bar with more weight. Let's say your 1 rep max in a straight bar deadlift is about 315 pounds, and it takes everything to get that up. Load that barbell, with 415 or 430, 450 pounds, something that that you cannot move. Another way that I like to do that is if you have a squat rack, you set up the pins and put the bar underneath. So instead of resting the bar on top where you do something like a rack row or a rack pull from where the bar is resting on top of the pins, you set the bar underneath the pins, set the pins up. So now you're essentially trying to deadlift the whole entire rack because that bar is underneath the pins. And again, unless you're competing for world's strongest man, chances are you're not going to lift that rack. Okay, so again, moving, we're trying to overcome an obstacle or a weight that we know we cannot move, is the concept of maximum isometrics. So we talked about the wall, we talked about the deadlift. Another way that we can do this is, again, if you have access to a squat rack, and let's say your max squat is like 315 again. When we have the bar racked in that position that we lift it out of and step back, when it's in that resting position on the rack, load up that barbell with so much weight that you can't even get that little lift off. Okay, so again, set the bar up about like mid squat level or whatever range of motion you're trying to work. Again, we talked about during isometrics, we like to work movement specific and sport specific or functional, everyday movement specific angles. So this, an overcoming isometric really isn't something that you would like practice at the bottom of a squat, because especially in the athletic world, when are you ever squatting all the way down butt to ground before you jump up? You're not going that low before a jump. You're going more into a quarter squat position. So if we're talking about our maximum isometric deadlift or our maximum isometric squat, we would want to set the bar up where when we are in that position of pulling, we're in about a quarter squat position. So again, trying to simulate those those game specific, those athletic movement specific joint angles. So we can do that with a squat and a deadlift with our feet parallel and even with each other. We could do it from more of a lunge or a split squat, kind of more like a running position. But again, just the main takeaway of our day to day is to explain how those maximum isometrics really, in terms of isometric training, probably give you the best bang for your buck. Again, because whenever I'm doing like an iso bicep curl, I can usually at any time, unless I hold it for a long time, pull myself out of it. So I'm not truly getting maximum muscle fiber recruitment or maximal efficiency of that muscle fiber recruitment, where as opposed to if I'm trying to move something that I know my body can't move, then we're truly getting maximal muscle fiber recruitment, and we're recruiting it as as quickly and efficiently as possible. So again, I think this is a very, very often overlooked part of training, because I'm sure a lot of you out there, we've seen isometric, maybe we do isometric stuff ourselves, or we have our clients or patients do isometric stuff. But throwing this concept in will definitely really give you the best bang for your buck in terms of isometric training. Because again, we talked about how we can get the same benefit of the maximal isometric contraction with lighter weight if we increase the time. But we're not going to have time to hold one movement for 3, 4, or 5 minutes. Okay, the benefit with our max isos is we can really get the same benefit as holding something in the same position for 3, 4, or 5 minutes. We can get that same benefit in anywhere from around 6 to 10 seconds. Okay, so that deadlift example where we put the bar underneath the pins. Okay, so I'm not trying to deadlift that whole rack for minutes. if I'm pulling as hard as I possibly can, I can get the maximum benefit out of that exercise by holding that max contraction or trying to pull up as hard as I can, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 seconds, within that range, as opposed to a minutes long exercise. It's an exercise that just lasts a couple seconds. So moving on with our topic of maximum isometrics, and this is key, because we always talk about how important injury prevention is, and safety always comes first when we're training. This can definitely be a very advanced technique, especially if we're talking about doing that maximum isometric deadlift, where we know no matter how hard we pull, we're not going to come up. And some people, if you are not proficient in the deadlift, then most likely you're putting yourself at a higher risk of injury if you try to jump into an exercise like that. Because if we're not efficient at our deadlifts, let's say you're the type of person when you deadlift, you tend to pull more with your back. Well, if we get into the point where we're doing a exercise where we're producing, or we're giving maximal effort, trying to lift as hard as we possibly can, then you're probably going to be the person that's still pulling with your back during that exercise. And if we're pulling maximally with our back, that's a recipe for disaster. That's a recipe for injury that we definitely do not want to do. So again, a very advanced technique. So safety is key, and the other key is this last part here. Master your regular isometrics first. So as opposed to trying to jump right into our maximum isometric deadlift, and we're trying to lift that rack off the ground, just do a dumbbell isometric deadlift. So take one dumbbell, hold it between your legs, come up about midway through a deadlift position, hold that dumbbell about mid shin level, and practice that first. Okay, again, safer technique, because again, we can come out of that. Okay, we're not doing a maximal, trying to produce as much maximal force as possible, so we are able to pull ourselves out of it if we do get to a position where something feels wrong, we feel like we're about to get injured. We can always get out of that easier than as opposed if I was trying to maximally lift something that that no matter how hard I pull, it's not going to move. That's greater risk of injury when we're doing these maximum isometrics. So definitely master our first set of isometrics that we talked about a few days ago. Okay, and refer to some of those exercises in the end of that video. If you noticed, I was doing mainly body weight stuff for those exercises, but you can definitely add some weight to that. But even if I did add some weight to those, like a dumbbell held in the goblet squat position up on my chin, or dumbbells held down at my side, use a weight that you can easily come out of. Okay, because that's less risk for injury. So master those first before trying to jump into these maximum isometrics. Again, it's a more advanced technique. But once you have mastered those, kind of those basic isometrics, this is definitely a beneficial type of isometric training to really, help your athleticism improve. Because we've talked about how, the second 10-day sequence, our force redirection is often an overlooked part of training. It's kind of, a lot of times it's the difference between, a good athlete and the athlete that really separates themselves from the pack. So throw these in, and it's an underlooked part of an already underlooked part of training. Okay, so if you throw these into your training, you'll definitely see benefits from it if you do it correctly. And by correctly, I mean master the first set of isometrics first. Those lower weight, I'm able to actually move the weight if I have to. Master those first before we go into these maximum isometric exercises. Okay, so I'll do it for today. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video. And if you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video, share the video, and also if you haven't, take a look at Amuso Athletics on Instagram for more training content. See you guys tomorrow.